And when we got paired with another district that's not right next to us, that's not in East Anchorage, I was like, well, who's going to stand up for us? And it took a fraction of a second for me to go, oh, that's me. But I had to ask that question first.
Welcome to the East Anchorage Book Club podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Gray. Today we talk with Donna Mears, a civil engineer who has a long history of public service to Anchorage and currently serves as vice chair of our Health and Human Services Commission. She is also a board member on the Northeast Community Council and vice president of the Alaska chapter of the Solid Waste Association of North America. She had been serving on the Stormwater Utility Commission and chairing the On-Site Water and Wastewater Technical Review Board, but the Bronson administration ended her service there, something we will discuss today. The main reason she is here, though, is because of her candidacy for the newly created Senate district, which pairs East Anchorage with South Eagle River. The incumbent senator is far-right Republican Lora Reinbold, and Ms. Mears, a progressive Democrat, provides a dramatically different alternative to Senator Reinbold's politics and leadership style. Well, hello, Donna Mears. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Andrew. Thank you for having me.
So, last name Mears.
Yes.
Any relation to the Mears Middle School?
It is not, but it's a good way for people to remember my name. I either say the middle school or the race car driver, depending on your frame of reference. But Mearses do have a big influence here in Alaska. Colonel Frederick Mears was part of the Alaska Engineering Corps and was vital in constructing the railroad linkage between Anchorage and Seward. And his wife, Jane, who the middle school is named after, was a school teacher. So that's where we get that from.
So you, though, are not originally from Alaska.
I'm not.
Where are you from?
I grew up in New Jersey.
Jersey. And how'd you get here?
Love. I was working for the Adirondack Park Agency in upstate New York after grad school. Met this cute young dude who asked me to go hiking. And since he's a wildlife biologist, it's not surprising that we ended up in Alaska.
And when did you make it up here? Yeah,
25 years ago.
25 years ago.
Yeah.
Brief little foray into researching you. You're a civil engineer.
Yes.
For those of us who aren't like experts in what different engineering is, what's a civil engineer?
Infrastructure mostly. There's some that specialize in structures and transportation, but my expertise is in sanitation infrastructure. All the stuff that people don't want to think about. So water, wastewater, solid waste, waste diversion, stormwater, all those things that, you put your trash out on the curb in the morning and you want it to go away, you turn on your tap and you want it to be there. All that stuff is pretty invisible, but it's pretty important. So,
how many kids do you have?
I've got two boys. They're both at Betty Davis East Anchorage High School. So I've got this little sliver of time where I've got, two boys together sort of launching off into the world. And it's kind of fun to see. But they started skiing with Junior Nordics at Russian Jack. In the Junior Nordic program. And did that for years, got into Hawks, and then really loved it. And they're really good. We're getting ready to head down to the races again this weekend.
Awesome. And so you live in East Anchorage. They go to East High.
Yep.
And how long have you been in East Anchorage?
My husband and I were fortunate to buy a house just after we got married in 2001. So we've got 20 years on the clock in East Anchorage.
And, the reason why you're here today, you are running for the Senate seat that represents East Anchorage. You tell us a little bit about how that decision came about and what is going on with that East Anchorage Senate district.
So I'm a little surprised to find myself running for office. I've been a community advocate for a long time, but this wasn't my path. I thought, maybe the assembly someday, because I've worked in municipal government and been a volunteer on that level for a long time. But with the redistricting and looking at our representation, being on our community council, right now I'm in House District 27, so I'm around Cheney Lake. And that goes down into Scenic Foothills and up Campbell Airstrip Road into Stuckagan Heights. Well, we're paired with the hillside and have been since the last redistricting. Bill Wielkowski used to be my senator. He lives 5 minutes from me. Well, now we're paired with the Hillside.
Holland is the senator.
Holland's our senator now. Giesel was the senator before him. Both parties have run candidates from the Hillside and from our paired district. And when we got paired with another district that's not right next to us, that's not in East Anchorage, I was like, well, who's going to stand up for us? And it took a fraction of a second for me to go, oh, that's me. But I had to ask that question first, right? Who's there? Who's standing up for us? And I've been doing, candidate recruitment, looking at, sort of boosting people up, encouraging people to get involved. Mm-hmm. This is not easy for me. I'm an engineer. Engineers are not known for being people. This work of policy making and listening to other people and all the rest of that. But there's need for it. There's a need for advocating for programs and being able to do policy work, the real things that keep our community moving. So I looked around once I realized that we needed to do this, I was like, oh man, it's me. And I've gotten a lot of support. There's a lot of people that are a lot less surprised than I am that I'm running. But as soon as I made that decision, I was like, wow, the community work that I've been doing, I'm ready. And I just need to start doing more of it.
What does your family think?
The kids are like, whatever, Mom, you do you. Are you going to start doing any less of the other stuff that you're doing? But when I posed the question to my husband, I sort of like set it up. I was like, so we really need someone from East Anchorage, and he didn't miss a beat. He said it should be you. So I didn't even get to ask him or approach him. He was totally on board with that.
So you mentioned doing a lot of municipal work and considering assembly run as being more, maybe more the natural progression. Tell us about what sort of work have you done in the municipality, or volunteer work or real work? Just give us a little bit of your resume.
So when I moved up in 1997, I moved up just for love, no job, no car. My husband, who was just a long distance boyfriend at the time, was working on getting housing all set up. And I ended up at the health department doing, it's called in the on-site program, which is a funny name because it's septic and wells. It's on-site systems. And so I got introduced to the health department into, the world of, government and service and all the rest of that. I mean, there's a good family history with that sort of thing, but that's where I ended up. And over there was 2 boards I was involved in as staff. The on-site tech board, which is, the very nerdy niche stuff for the wells and septics, but I was also the staff support for the Health and Human Services Commission. That's come a ways.
Right.
And the last few years I've been leadership there. But in the meantime, I was on the Solid Waste and Recycling Advisory Commission, which is the commission that supports solid waste services, which runs the landfill and the Central Transfer Station and the Girdwood Transfer Station and does trash and recycling pickup for 12,500 residential customers and a bunch of commercial customers. Well, they started the recycling program when I was there. So I got to be part of that. And then since then...
Can I interrupt right there and talk a little about the recycling program?
Sure.
So I'll just say, I moved back to Alaska in 2017 from California, and I was surprised by how difficult it was to recycle in Anchorage, at least for those of us who live in this particular neighborhood. So can you talk a little bit just about the ins and outs of Anchorage's recycling program, its history, and sort of what you see going down the road?
Well, before I got here, it started off with volunteer efforts, and it started off in a Quonset hut with people dropping off materials and then doing brokering. And eventually it got taken over by what was the local waste hauling company at the time. And it was purely drop off. It was purely bringing stuff and in sorted materials. When I moved up in 97, people had gotten a little energized because glass recycling had stopped. At the time, glass was being backhauled to the lower 48 along with pretty much everything else. And it's a big deal in households. It's a very noticeable thing. And when you don't have glass recycling as part of your household stuff, it's people get annoyed. And it's because it's not a complete system. It's not taking care of everything. So there was a local entrepreneur who was also running the compost facility out of Point Waranzoff, John Dean, who had experience in aggregates and made a system for the glass recycling, and worked on a number of markets for that for years. And one of the things about recycling is it sometimes takes an individual that has a lot of vision and talent to bring things forward, and that was John. And when John got sick and passed away, both of those operations didn't work as well as when he was there. So one of the things that I've been really trying to support is local recycling infrastructure, which makes sense for some of the bigger things. So we're not going to get a smelter, so the metals are going down to the lower 48. We're not going to do plastics recycling up here. That stuff goes to the lower 48. But concrete, tires, asphalt, glass are all things that, we have in a significant enough quantity or have a significant enough end use that we can do them here. So
how do you recycle concrete?
You make it into small bits and use it as aggregate. So you use it as fill-on projects, or that's a big one. Is you just make it into smaller bits of concrete and use it. When you're bedding things, when you're that structural bit of soil before you put something more substantial on it. Trails, roads, driveways.
Yeah, I'm not an engineer, so that's all new. That's new stuff for me. Can you talk about the landfill and its end date? And we can cut it if you have nothing to say. Because I know that that's come up recently. I know there was some interviews with some people talking about the landfill having an expiration date and having a point where it won't be usable anymore. I don't know if that's something that should be on people's radars or not.
I can nerdy talk about that. So the Anchorage Regional Landfill started accepting waste in 1987. And for those of us of an age, 1987, I remember 1987. I think I've got some shirts in my closet from 1987. And when I was first doing advocacy work for recycling, when I first moved to the state in 1997, that was, the landfill was 10 years old. And the predicted end date, I think it was 2042, seemed a long way off. It's been 20 years, 25 years. And the last director commissioned master plan, and, waste study, where are we going? And that's the sort of nerdy infrastructure work that needs to be done regularly. You need to look at what you've got, what condition it is, how long do we need to go, how long can we go for? And they're like, well, there's a little fewer people than was predicted in the population. We're using less stuff because packaging has gotten more efficient. Not because we're using less stuff, really, in a lot of ways we're consuming more, but some of that's gotten more efficient. And, and some of the things that we're diverting from the landfill take up a lot of space. So, we're like, okay, we can get a little bit more life out of the landfill. But they also looked at, well, what do we need to do to make it last even longer? And it's important because where do we go next? It's not going to be anywhere else in Anchorage. I don't see it going out into the Matsu. How would we get it there? By train? Where are the rail lines? How
does it get to the landfill now?
So how it gets to the landfill now is it gets picked up by collection trucks, and then it goes in the bowl. It goes to the central transfer station. It gets transferred into 120-yard walking floors, and then it goes out to the landfill. But there's some stuff that's brought back into town, which is leachate. So all the juicy stuff and all the precipitation that's gone through the garbage turns into leachate, and that goes into our wastewater treatment system, into the AWU system at Turpin Road, right by my house. And then that goes through the system, and that goes through Asplund wastewater treatment plant, and then it goes out to the inlet. So we need to do better at that too.
Interesting. So do you think it wouldn't go to the Matsu because of the issue of transporting it there, or because the Matsu would say no?
Both. Whenever you touch something, it gets expensive. Every time you touch it, as wherever you move it, there's a cost to that. So the Matsu had done some master planning for solid waste, I think back in the 80s, maybe it was the 90s, but I think it was the 80s. And they carved out a huge area for the central landfill. But there's trails there that people use. And when they were doing a landfill expansion and encroaching on those trails, people are like, whoa, this is where we recreate. So even when things are master planned out, you've got waste in conflict with other stuff. So first off, we need to make less waste. Second of all, it's a resource. Alaska is a resource extraction state. We spend all these resources digging stuff or pumping stuff up out of the ground. We use it for a little while and then we throw it into another hole. Well, that's dumb. If you're looking at recycling, then you're like, oh, well, this resource that we took out of the ground, we'll, do some more things to it and we'll use it again. That's kind of the start of some of my passion and advocacy stuff. It's super practical. This has resource. We just need to do a little bit more to it.
I first interacted with you back in September when you helped organize, I assume through your role on the Health and Human Services Commission, a group of doctors from Providence to testify at an assembly meeting about COVID and what was happening in the hospitals with the crisis standard of care. Can you talk about how you organized that?
It was not organized. The Health and Human Services Commission had met the week before, and we had things on our agenda that we wanted to get to, but we could not ignore the fact that, Delta was problematic. And the municipality was lacking in leadership and messaging, at the very least, of, hey, this is something that we need to be taking personal responsibility for. And, we really tried to highlight, I had the support of the commission on my testimony of what needed to be done. So as a commission, I put in a request for an appearance request to be on the agenda. And I got up there and there were all these doctors that had been doing organizing to come and plead because, Providence had just shifted into critical care that weekend. And there was just an opportunity to make some space for them because the assembly is an amazing place for people to have interaction with their government. And a few people have sort of co-opted that and made it a pulpit for whatever they are mad about at the moment, which is part of the point. But it's a small group of people, and the small group of people had gotten there and gave no space for this message. And our medical professionals should not have to be doing this work. They should not have to feel so disenfranchised with their ability to message to the public that they have to show up and talk directly to government and say, please, please, please encourage people to do this, because having trusted voices is huge in not convincing people, but providing the information that they need to move forward. And that was really that opportunity for the doctors, and that got traction because people are really bad at evaluating risk and they don't know what's going on behind closed doors. It's hard for them to know what's going on for the people that are super affected by COVID and the other things that people go to the hospital for.
How have the board meetings been since then?
There've only been a couple. We meet every other month. So that was September meeting. November meeting we had. Our regularly scheduled meeting was the night after there were 3 new appointments to the board. I haven't really talked about this, but we were asked by the administration not to hold the meeting because of quorum. Some of what they asked was a little aggressive about not holding the meeting. And we said, well, we won't vote on anything, but we're still holding the meeting because I really believe that having reliable and accessible public meetings is important, and board and commission meetings are. So we held our meeting. We were talking about the importance of public health, and we had a resolution on that. And we were also talking about racism as a public health issue. And we were working on a resolution on that. So we worked through the text of that and had another meeting the following week because the Anchorage Assembly was starting to talk about mask mandate. And they were having a work session the following week, and we thought our work was important to get done. And we actually got support from the 2 of the 3 new members that came.
The 3 new board members were Sarah Slater, Jerry York, and Sean Degler. Did they change the character of the board?
Jerry and Sean came to the meeting, and they were great participants. The meeting was a little bit more formal than it had been previously, but they were supportive of the public health measure. We made some changes in the racism as a public health factor with their input, and other folks were involved with that, although they didn't ultimately vote for it. And then we had a conversation again this week, and Jerry was the only one of the 3 new members that came, but he participated in the conversation. And we were mostly talking about, where we're at now. And where we're at now is, along with the rest of the country, COVID testing is difficult and challenging to access. On the personal level, trying to acquire test kits from retailers is challenging. The kits that were publicly available were in high demand and were given out quickly. The testing centers had long lines. Omicron came on quick and hard. And we're just coming back from visiting people at Christmas where, like, my family's personal strategy, seeing my parents and my husband's father, was, let's make sure we're not COVID positive before we go into their households. But all of a sudden, a week later, that had shifted with the test scarcity. So that was problematic, and the health department and the mayor's office have been working a lot on that. But things have shifted, and it's private sector now. But also the communication is problematic. And we tried to have a conversation about that. And it still needs work, and I'm not sure that they fully recognize how important their voice is and how important it is for the public to trust the message coming out of our health department. It is amazing to me that public health messaging has gotten so controversial, and that we are not in the place where we can trust the messages that are coming out of our local government. That's where a lot of people are looking to.
So somebody who has done a lot of messaging regarding COVID and health is the incumbent senator for the new Senate district. That would be Senator Rora Reinbold. Can you speak to that at all?
I can. First off, I'm not running against Lora. I'm running for East Anchorage, and now that we're paired with Eagle River, I'm starting to show up to meetings there, and I'm running for the people of Eagle River. But yeah, no, that's problematic. You've got elected officials, and Lora's at the top of the list of people that are not just providing disinformation, but also being very disrespectful of public health measures. Wearing a mask is a small thing to ask of people as we're dealing with this, particularly when you are riding on an airplane with a bunch of other people. And
for those who've been living under a rock, Lora Reinbold was banned from Alaska Airlines for not wearing a mask.
Not just not wearing it, but being making a big deal out of it,
right.
and yes, and very much so. And
I will admit, and I think probably some of our listeners will as well, that I haven't paid a lot of close attention to Senator Lora Reinbold because she's not my senator. She's in Eagle River. I get it. That's their that's their people. That's their scene. What I haven't paid close attention to is it seems like that she's been very obstructionist in government. I know that she has criticized Governor Dunleavy multiple times for considering him a liberal because of some of his policies and her feeling that he's sort of bowing down to Biden and not really delivering on the conservative goods. So I'm just wondering if you've paid attention to it, if you have any comments just on her overall governing style in Juneau.
Well, I've been paying a little bit more attention to it, and I've been going to community council meetings, and I went to the town hall last week that Lora Reinbold, Ken McCarty, and Kelly Merrick had in Eagle River. And they talked about the upcoming legislation they were pre-filing. And everything that the two things that Lora talked about were just, they're mired in the past and complaining about things that have happened in the last 2 years. They were not forward thinking. They were not working to pull together with other people and make progress. Look, I'm all about medical choice and medical freedom and making your own choices. But some of the stuff that she's been advocating is far beyond that. And it's challenging to get over that kind of messaging.
Right. And you said you're running for East Anchorage.
Yes.
What do you want to do?
Well, from my community council work, the things that people come to us the most are social issues.
Are you the president of your community council?
No, but I've been on the board for the last couple of years.
Gotcha.
And, there's a couple of things that are my things.
Mm-hmm.
But dealing with homelessness is a huge issue in the municipality, and it kind of coincides with the Health and Human Services Commission work. We need to work more upstream. The crisis with folks that's not where they're starting, that's where they're ending. And looking at substance misuse treatment, about mental health treatment, and looking further upstream at adverse childhood experiences, how we treat our children, how we start off in early life. Our community is important. And when we're struggling with our, the cohesiveness and the ability of our community to get along, eventually that leads into tension in families, that leads to other things that are just not healthy for us, especially as children. But on the nerdy side, getting back to the engineering stuff is, the other thing that people come to us most is traffic calming and road conditions and trails and parks. And, one of the things that, after I got surprised overrunning is, man, this is a really good time for an engineer to be in government. There is hundreds of millions of dollars coming from the federal government in infrastructure projects. And we as a nation and also as a state and a city are way behind on where we need to be with infrastructure. Just maintaining the stuff we have, even, much less building new stuff.
What's your community council?
I'm in Northeast Community Council.
Northeast. Yeah, I tuned in a little bit to Scenic Foothills Community Council meeting recently when they were talking about the issues with the Muldoon Curve.
Yep.
And about wanting to traffic calm it, but kind of meeting a roadblock because it's a state road. So I definitely know that is something that people are talking about right now. You mentioned homelessness. The mayor released an interview yesterday in which he said that we are back to where we were in July as far as solutions for homelessness, which is a little bit concerning. He said that we still need this navigation center. And then as he kind of talks for a couple of minutes, he mentions we've got 1,000 homeless people that we need to take care of, which for someone who lives in that vicinity, it's a little nerve-wracking to hear him talk about going back to square one and wanting to create a navigation center, and then a few moments later saying the 1,000 person number again.
Yeah.
I wonder if you could speak a little bit about what you see as sensible solutions for the homelessness problem in Anchorage.
This has not generally been an area of advocacy for me, but I've been, paying attention as a slightly more involved citizen. And I really think that more smaller facilities that are supporting people is the way to go. One of the things that was done under the last mayoral administration was dealing with certain demographics of homelessness. You've got families with children, you've got seniors, you've got vets, and not looking at this as a monolithic issue, but dealing with those smaller groups, and because everybody's got different needs, and providing that. But a big problem is we just don't have the mental health services that we need. That is huge. That's huge on our homelessness issue. It's huge on our crime rates. And there's a lot of people that are incarcerated that need a different kind of support. And we need to support people before we get there. But getting back to, where we're at, because there are a lot of people that have got a chronic crisis going on. Having something like a navigation center, having a spot where people can go to get services sounds fantastic. That concept in general of here we are and we're here to help you. Because there's a lot going on. But having it all in one spot that's also included with places for people to sleep and feeding them and all the rest of it, that's just too much. And there's been problems with the Sullivan Arena of having so many folks there for such a long period of time, and people getting lost in the cracks. And we need personal connections. Treating quote 1,000 people as a monolith is not where we need to go.
So I'm going to confess that I've never really paid attention to boards and commissions.
A lot of people haven't.
And I started to pay more attention to it. I listened to a little bit of the Eagle River Community Council meeting last night. Were you there?
Yes.
So I heard Portia Erickson speaking from the mayor's office about there's still a lot of openings. We still need people to apply. And I'm just curious about, you have a pretty long history with boards and commissions. Can you talk about the people who normally show up to do this? Do we have more openings than we normally have? Is it a partisan thing? When a certain person's a mayor, do certain people apply? And then when a different mayor is there, do certain people apply? I guess, as someone who knows nothing about this topic, really, what are the boards and commissions? What do they do? And who signs up for them?
So boards and commissions are sort of topic-specific mini assembly meeting type opportunities for people to get engaged with government. There's not the rulemaking and legislation making kind of things that happen in the assembly for most of them. It's more advisory for a lot of things. I've been on a board that's quasi-judicial, but then there's the plating board and the P&Z board where an urban design commission where you bring projects and there's decisions made. But for the most part, boards and commissions are professionals and other concerned citizens that spend their time to know more about municipal government, about specific programs or specific departments. And so I've recruited people for a long time for boards and commissions because there always seem to be openings or they're always, somebody's moving or taking another job or, their term's up and they've had their time. And it's all sorts of people, but, somebody that just is a little bit more interested and, it's a great way to get to know government. It's a great way to learn how to run meetings. It's a great way to get to know people. And it's a great way to have a little deeper lens into how things work. In the past, so I've been involved with boards and commissions on one level or another for 25 years. In the past, partisanship has pretty much had nothing to do with them. In mayoral administration, when they're recruiting for a position, might go to their, network of people and professionals that they know. And, that might stack boards and commissions because you mostly need to talk people into doing it because it's volunteer work. But it's unprecedented from my experience how boards and commissions have been run now. First of all, kudos that it's recognized that boards and commissions are important, and filling those positions is important because that hasn't been more than a passing interest in a lot of administrations, and problematic for all the mayors that I've experienced. But the removal of people that aren't of your political circle, regardless of their technical ability, I've not seen.
So have people been removed from boards?
Not removed, but not reappointed.
Not reappointed.
So going back to the beginning in that on-site stuff, the wells and septic stuff, there's not many of us that have experience, much less expertise in wells and septic systems. I joined that board several years ago when they were rewriting the code. And in that case, the board literally wrote every word of a code rewrite. We referenced the original documentation, but everything we went over. And when that process was over, I found myself leading that group. Having worked for the program, having worked for a private sector engineer in that, I have got more experience in that field than just about anybody in town, certainly from those multiple perspectives. And I was not reappointed. I was asked to reapply. Fine, no problem. I can understand that. But the person sitting in my seat is the husband of an assembly candidate that is being supported by the mayor, who has, some but little experience in it. And
Stephanie Taylor's husband?
No, Hensley.
Oh, Hensley.
Steve Hensley. So he's got some experience in it. I, vaguely remember the name, but it's not something he ever did, full time. He's got other civil engineering experience. But we were working on stuff that needed to be done. And, I was working side by side by, my farmer boss, who's a huge Bronson supporter. And also, I've worked with the new. I've worked with Ron Thompson, who's the head of the development of. I don't even know what their new titles are these days, but all the permitting stuff. And I'm pragmatic, and I don't want to have codes and regulations and burdens that are unreasonable. I don't want to have a code just to have a code. It needs to be practical. It needs to be it needs to be practical. It needs to be enforceable, and it needs to make sense. But there's room for legislation. There are things that we need to pay attention to. How much wastewater gets applied to a certain type of soil doesn't sound important, but it is, because we want them to function the same. We want to be able to provide that sanitation, public health measure throughout our, super dense concentration of septic systems, on the hillside and Eagle River.
So it sounds like you've got a history of working with people of different political stripes on these boards and commissions that you've served on in the last 20 plus years.
Absolutely.
Is that your intention if you get to Juneau?
Oh, absolutely. The work that needs to be done is the work that needs to be done. When we're talking about infrastructure projects, when we're, it's, what's the old line, politics, or potholes don't have politics. And a lot of the work that needs to be done it's just work that needs to be done. And there's people with expertises on that vote for different people than I do, that their professional expertise is very valid and good. And we need that professional expertise in Juneau. We need that professional expertise on the Assembly. We need that professional expertise on community councils and on boards and commissions. And it's not just professional expertise, it's community expertise. There's a lot of people that are providing support on things that are not what they do for a day job.
If people like what they're hearing today, how can they help your campaign?
First off, I would like to hear other people's experiences. I have been doing community advocacy work for 25 years, but have gotten much more specific with the Northeast Community Council and my neighbors' stuff in the last 3-4 years. But I don't have a handle on all the issues of everyone in my neighborhood, much less, going down to scenic foothills and, working on learning what issues are for folks in Eagle River. That's the biggest thing is, I want to know what's important to people. And we're working at standing up a website and, Facebook page. And, there's not much content right now, but, we'll get there.
Do you have a website yet?
I do. Mears for Alaska.
MearsForAlaska.com.
Absolutely.
So you brought it up about, I think most people would agree that Lora Reinbold has not been an overarching presence in East Anchorage. So I think there's definitely some fear that if she were to be reelected to represent that area, that there would be some challenges. How can you reassure Eagle River that you're going to adequately represent their issues, their concerns?
Good question. I've been showing up. I'm joking that I put in a placeholder tagline for the campaign, I'll show up. And I have been. Laura's got a little bit of territory in the Northeast Community Council area. It's that bit of J-Bear and Alaska Native Cultural Heritage Center and Bartlett High School and Tacotney Commons. There aren't any people that live there, but these are still, there's still community facilities that are there. Never seen her.
Interesting.
I've been to the South Fork Community Council, the Eagle River Valley Community Council, and the Eagle River Community Council. All three of them these last 2 months since I've been thinking about and then decided to run. Haven't seen Laura. I've talked to people. She doesn't show up.
And I'll just say for our listeners that I am on the board of the Campbell Park Community Council. I have never been to a meeting where we have not had our senator, or on the rare occasion that she's not there, it's Elby Gray Jackson, a representative for her. Same thing with our House rep. Andy Josephson, shows up every single month. And we have a very small community council. So I think just for those of you who don't do a lot of community councils, it is commonplace for the senator and the House rep to at least send a representative from their office to community council meetings.
Absolutely.
What book do you want all of our listeners to read?
I got super nerdy and I actually brought it for you.
Oh, okay.
If you would like to read it.
I would love to.
The book that Ms. Mears has just handed me is called Get Mears, Frederick Mears, Builder of the Alaska Railroad by Catherine Carson Crittenden.
Catherine Crittenden did a story on him and his family, and it's extra nerdy, not just because of the Mears last name, but because of the infrastructure work that he was doing on the Alaska Railroad. And not just that, but also Anchorage was growing at the time. He got here at the time when Anchorage was still a tent city down in Ship Creek. And the Alaska Engineering Commission is what set up the grid in downtown Anchorage and sold lots and was concerned about things like trash pickup and road conditions. So although I'm not related I think there's a lot of parallels in the work that needs to be done. And I'm not a teacher, but I'm a very involved parent. So, having his wife being a teacher kind of speaks to me as well. So,
Donna Mears, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today.
Thank you, Andrew.
We wish you the best of luck.
Thank you to Corey Coolidge for making this podcast listenable. And big thanks to you, our listeners. If you liked what you heard today, please subscribe and recommend us to a friend. We also host Zoom events. Please visit eastanchoragebbookclub.com for more information. And if you'd like to send a comment, please do so at eastanchoragebbookclub@gmail.com. On our next episode, we will host Assembly members Felix Rivera and Christopher Constant. Please tune in.